Good evening. My name is Robert Hicks. We're honored to have you here. This is unbelievable for us. Some 15 years ago, I called up Ernie Bacon and Warner Bass and Angela Calhoun and Danny Anderson and Jeannie Nelson, and I asked them to have lunch with me, which was somewhat unprecedented that I was going to pay for lunch. And out of that meeting was born what we now call Franklin's Charge. And it grew. Eventually, Mary Pierce and so many others that are in this room, and eventually, several months later, Julian Bibb joined us in this work. I'm looking out to a room full of people who have been either actively on the board of Franklin's Charge, or who are actively on the board of Franklin's Charge, or who, over the years, have been great friends of Franklin's Charge. And so, over the last 15 years, as we did something that no community in America has ever done, to raise through our relationship with, I see Steve McDaniel here, I see so many people here connected, over $27 million for battlefield reclamation. And we also did something else no one else had ever done before in this community, and that was to unite all the preservation groups together, whether they be the Land Trust of Tennessee or the Harpeth River or the Carter House or Carrington Plantation, the Heritage Foundation, eventually African American Heritage Society, eventually all the groups came together to do something never done before. And you are sitting, or a few of you standing, on the fruit of that. A golf course that could have been 36 to 71 homes, the largest segment of this battlefield that is left because of men and women like Danny Anderson and Rick Warwick and others that said, no, we need to do something. And so I want to welcome you tonight to this really overdue celebration of appreciation. Van West is going to speak at some point, and I think he is the reason why that we got together tonight. Carol Van West, who is the state historian along with multiple of other titles, said, you need to thank people. And we are thanking you. We are incredibly grateful for what you have done. If you want to know who has made this successful, then I would say, look around you. Because these are the men and women who, with you, have made this happen. So I thank you, and I welcome you. And now I'm going to ask my friend Tyler Borders to come up here and have an invocation.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening. Let's pray together if you bow your heads with me. Lord, I thank you for bringing each of us safely to this gathering. Lord, we praise you and we surrender our lives to you in worship and in thanksgiving. The Proverbs says that in our hearts we plan our way, but Lord, it's you that establishes our steps. So direct us, Lord, we ask tonight. As we gather, we remember those who are not with us today. For those who are sick, Lord, we ask for healing. For those afar, we ask for your blessing and protection. We invite your Spirit to move freely in and among us, equip us, challenge us, and teach us. But I pray that you have your way in this meeting and let it work for good. Let us encounter your amazing grace. And we ask all this in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen.
And now that you're comfortably seated, would you stand up while we do the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now, we're going to ask Tyler Borders. I don't think that prayer was strong enough. Can you show a film that we have made to kind of talk about what we have been trying to do over the years?
This ground is sacred. It is soaked in the blood of thousands of American soldiers. On November 30th, 1864, a military charge twice the size of Gettysburg roared up this soil, and the future of the United States shifted. The Battle of Franklin was without a doubt one of the bloodiest 5 hours of combat in the entire Civil War. Nearly 10,000 fathers, sons, were killed, wounded, or lost. The heart of the Confederacy died that night, and the Civil War was over less than 5 months later. Slavery was defeated on this soil. We became Americans on this soil. Yet, today, this hallowed ground is at risk of being forgotten, lost to fast food chains, golf courses, and strip malls. We are Franklin's charge. We are righting this wrong. There is no other organization in the country with our track record of battlefield preservation. This matters. This is America's story. This is your story. Fight for it.
In the midst of us meeting on that porch and having that meal, those 6 or so people, we had to figure out a way to go before the community and say what had been said again and again by so many of you, but never had really done more than fall on deaf ears. We had to act. And the best way to get people to believe what you're doing is important is to bring in the National Geographic. And the story is that Jim Campy from the now the American Battlefield Trust called me and he said, there's this guy named Adam Goodhart who is writing an article about America's battlefields then and now. And he was using Matthew Brady photographs. Now, by the way, just to qualify this, Matt Brady never made it to Franklin. It was going to be tough. And he said, so you need to call them and get them to include Franklin. And that was tough. Because basically the article was pretty much written. And so finally, after a lot of calls from me, the National Geographic asked the photographer that was showing the battlefields now to fly down here. A guy named Michael, a brilliant photographer. And he called me up and he said, I'm in town. What should I see? And I said, well, let me meet with you. I'm not going to meet with you. I don't want you to taint this whole thing. He goes, but I need to know where the Pizza Hut is. Because what we're going to do is we're going to have a postage stamp photograph of the Pizza Hut. And then we're going to try to get Adam to write a thing called Franklin the Lost Cause. And I said, okay, but be sure you go out to see where they're building the Target. Be sure you go out to see what the Heritage Foundation and what so many people have been doing over the years. Be sure you see not only the Pizza Hut, but the Domino's. Be sure you see all of this. And he called me back the next morning and he said, do you want to go to lunch? And he came back and he somehow convinced Adam, you need to come down here. And when I say that we owe Adam Goodhart pretty much everything, I mean we owe Adam Goodhart pretty much everything. He became a friend of ours, of many of ours in Franklin. When I was the Grand Marshal in the Christmas parade that year, and I got there and I realized the magnet sticker on the car misspelled the word Marshall. And I wasn't going to ride in that car. I decided to walk my dog, Jake, the world's greatest dog, and Adam drove the car. So he has become, over the years, a great, great friend of Franklin's. And so without further ado, may I introduce my friend, Adam Goodhart.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thanks to all of you. You know, when I come to Franklin now, I really feel like it's a homecoming, but tonight I'm going to try to bring my mind and my memory back a little bit, and yours as well, to a time when Franklin was a strange and new place to me, one of those foreign shores that a National Geographic reporter lands on once in a while. So I was asked to reflect a little bit on that story of coming down here, and also a little bit on Franklin's charge and your success and the importance of what you're doing and will do in the future. So, you know, when I was a kid, I always dreamed of being a reporter for National Geographic magazine. Every time a new issue arrived, I would just read it cover to cover. I would pull out all the maps and I would tape them to the walls of my room until not really much of a square inch of wall was even visible, and the ceiling as well. And I see my brother Harry, who's here tonight, nodding right there in the back. You can tell them, Harry, that that's true. So I always dreamed of traveling off to exotic foreign lands where I'd explore ancient pyramids and search for lost tribes, all while wearing a pith helmet and one of those khaki vests with all the really big pockets in it. So almost 40 years later, my dream really mostly has come true. I've now done 5 features for National Geographic. The last one was a cover story on Abraham Lincoln that was the most read article of the year. However, there is one significant part of the dream that has gone unfulfilled, which is that my National Geographic assignments have never actually taken me farther from home than Illinois. And trust me, they do look at you a little funny in Illinois when you show up in a pith helmet and one of those big khaki vests with all the pockets in it. So anyway, here's hoping I get, maybe I could go to Missouri next time. Who knows? Anyway, the assignment that brought me here to Franklin in 2004 was my very first piece ever for the magazine. This piece on Civil War battlefields then and now for the 140th anniversary of the war's end. Now, I did a lot of work on this story. I started by spending a weekend at the Spotsylvania battlefield as a Civil War reenactor, to be specific, a Confederate newspaper correspondent, so that I was allowed to scribble in my notebook, which I otherwise wouldn't have been allowed to do on the battlefield. I went to Gettysburg, I went to Charleston, I went all around to lots and lots of different places. I talked to preservationists, I talked to developers, I talked to historians, and really everybody in between. I filled notebook after notebook with terrific material for what was supposed to be a pretty short piece. Now, you know, a good reporter always over-reports. Now, I over-reported this piece, especially because it was my first piece ever for National Geographic. I wanted to get tons and tons and tons of material. So to pick up the story where Robert's left off, sometime towards the end of my reporting, I got a call from this photographer named Michael Melford, and Michael was calling from Franklin, Tennessee. which was a place where I have to admit I was only dimly aware that there was a battle in 1864. I guess I remembered a little bit about it. But Michael just bubbled over on the phone. He said, "You've got to make it down here. There's a battlefield with a Pizza Hut on it, and there's this old barn full of bullet holes, and a famous plantation, and there are also these incredibly fun people. I just spent the whole day yesterday with somebody named Robert Hicks, and he's got a log cabin and an art collection and all these cool friends, and I can't even begin to describe it." So I could not quite fathom what Michael was babbling on about. And anyway, as I said, I'd already done so much reporting that the article seemed like it was pretty much in the can. The Pizza Hut that he was talking about, it seemed like, maybe at best sort of a cute photo with a caption, but hardly a reason to get on a plane from Washington to Tennessee. But something told me that I should listen to Michael. This was a guy, after all, who had spent decades of his life traveling the world for National Geographic in search of stunning places, often inhabited by strange tribes. And it sounded, yes, it sounded like he'd found one right here. So I came, and that was truly, and I mean this literally, one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So I'll never forget that first day of being driven around by Robert. He seemed, I'm sorry to say this, Robert, he seemed almost literally delusional. He was seeing a landscape that was not even there, cavalry charges and glittering bayonets amidst clouds of musket smoke where an ordinary person's naked eye might only see strip malls and chain restaurants, including the notorious Pizza Hut. Dun, dun. For a time, I wondered if I was trapped in the SUV of a madman. But then we got to Carnton, and as he walked me through the mansion and the cemetery and the gardens, I began to come under the spell of this extraordinary place and its extraordinary stories. What's more, I began to meet some extraordinary people. On my last morning in town, I sat on the porch right over here at Carnton with Robert, with the late Tommy Murdoch, who spoke eloquently about what this place meant to him as an African American and the descendant of people who were enslaved. With Angela Calhoun, Rick Warwick, Julian Bibb, Mayor Tom Miller. I think Mary Pierce was there as well. I listened to these people as they dreamed big dreams and planned big plans. And that was when I first really realized the potential of this place, which, like all great preservation and restoration projects, doesn't ultimately depend on bricks and mortar, although you have some great bricks and mortar here. Doesn't depend on acreage, although you've got some spectacular acreage here. It depends on people coming together, sharing a vision, ready to work hard. And you have got that here in this room. I'm reminded of General John Bell Hood's words before unleashing his ragged army against the Union forces just a few hundred yards from this spot. He said, "We will make the fight." And fortunately, your full frontal attack was a little bit more successful than Hood's was in November 1864. So the National Geographic piece came out the following April with a large section of it on Franklin and for the group that would become soon Franklin's Charge. And I'm told, Robert has said it again, that the piece had a significant impact on preservation down here, although I do suspect it had less to do with my text than with this spectacular turned out to be a full-page photo of the Pizza Hut by Michael Melford that's published in the magazine. But in any case, that November, I was shocked and delighted to get an email in my inbox inviting me to come down and help swing the first symbolic blows of the mallet against that cheesy fake brick facade of the Pizza Hut. I do mean cheesy. Sorry. So in other words, I'm sorry. You invited me here. What can I say? Fasten your seatbelts. I'm making no promises. So in other words, I was being asked to inflict one of the most significant casualties since General Claiborne was felled near that very spot. And it's a matter of lasting regret to me that I was teaching that day at my college up in Maryland. I wasn't able to make the trip, but I was here very much in spirit. But there were two even more momentous things that happened in that year of 2005 when the article was published. One was Robert Hicks's great novel, The Widow of the South, whose masterful storytelling and character creation brought Carrie McGavick to life and brought Franklin's story to the world and continues to bring Franklin's story to the world for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of grateful readers. And then, of course, there was the official incorporation of this extraordinary group, Franklin's Charge. So, although I didn't make it down here for that Pizza Hut demolition, I did come down many times in the years that followed, seeing the progress of your great work and making many new friends in the process. People all devoted to the cause of preservation here, all making their own contributions. Not only those people on the porch I just mentioned, I could name so many more names, but I have to mention the Heller family, and Rod and Kay are here tonight, descendants of the McGavick family, without whom I know that none of this effort could possibly have succeeded. Thank you so much, Rod and Kay. Justin Stelter, yes. Justin Stelter, who brings his love and expertise and dedication to the historic gardens here at Carnton, and also now to the board of Franklin's Charge, has also become a very dear friend here tonight with my other dear friend, his wife, Olivia. So this is just a very, very dear place to me. So many others as well. During those trips, I've sat in on fireside guitar pulls at Labor in Vain. Luckily, no one asked me to actually pull the guitar. Please don't. I've worn seersucker to the Iroquois steeplechase. I've eaten grilled ham at Greer's. In fact, that was just last night. Delicious. And I drove the car in that Christmas parade, as Robert mentioned, which I think really was what exactly am I doing here moment in my life. It was a good one. And through it all, whether visiting Franklin or watching from a distance, I've taken tremendous vicarious pride in the work of Franklin's Charge, the most successful battlefield reclamation in American history. Which I would add that it's been amidst, shall we say, an increasingly challenging real estate environment in greater Nashville, has now reclaimed more than 150 acres of this incredibly important place. I also have to add here that the greatest joy of this particular visit, in addition to celebrating Franklin's Charge with all of you, has been to see my dear friend Robert surviving and thriving once more, filling me with thankfulness that a man who has preserved so much and who has cherished so much and so many should himself be preserved to be cherished by us all. Now, a lot has changed in the past decade and a half. Franklin has gone from a delightful small southern town to a delightful small southern town with an Anthropology on Main Street. And also a place where there's nowhere to get a bad slice of pizza anymore. I mean, you guys, first Pizza Hut, and then Domino's. I mean, you better not come for Papa John's, that's all I'm saying. Don't come for Papa. Anyway, but there are other developments that have been, I'm sorry. So the Civil War's, so in that era of change, the Civil War's place in our national memory has also changed much more dramatically. A whole lot of new work in scholarship and public history, I think fueled especially by the sesquicentennial celebration a few years ago, has reaffirmed exactly what people 150 years ago took for granted, but somewhere in the decades after the war we managed to lose, which is that slavery and race were the very heart of this conflict. A long overdue consensus is emerging, or rather re-emerging, among people who study and write about and think about the war. And there's more and more acceptance of the fact that the Confederacy was not just the lost cause, but also the wrong cause. And as Robert said, yes, I'll applaud with you on that, Robert. As Robert said eloquently in that National Geographic piece when I interviewed him in 2004, he said the Old South died here so that we all might live and so that America might live. Now, other developments have been less positive. Rather ominously for Franklin, Civil War battlefield tourism is down, way, way down. The year I was born, 1970, the National Park at Gettysburg had almost 7 million visitors. Last year, just 950,000. Civil War reenacting is way down as well. Knowledge of the war and a sense of its central importance in American history is in steep decline among millennials, as I can tell you firsthand. Last spring at Washington College, where I teach, I taught a course called The Unfinished Civil War, which was about the long shadow that event cast and continues to cast over our country's history. And at the second class meeting, it occurred to me, especially since it was a 100-level course, a lot of the students were freshmen, most of them were taking it for a distribution requirement, I should probably find out what they knew about the Civil War. And so I put together a questionnaire, didn't call it a pop quiz, didn't want to stress them out, called it a questionnaire. So I said, in what years did the war begin and end? Identify in a sentence the following: Gettysburg, Appomattox, Jim Crow. And when I collected the results, well, of a dozen or so students in the class, almost none, it was a small seminar, but almost none knew the dates of the Civil War. Many of them wrote 18 ? You know, when, for millennials, like the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries all blend together. My 12-year-old niece told me recently, "You're from the 1900s." Might as well be the 1800s. Anyway, so none of them knew the dates, which actually, also for somebody who published one book called 1861, and I'm working on another book titled 1865, it's kind of an ominous sign not to know when the dates of the Civil War were. But most of my students did identify Gettysburg as the place where an important battle happened and also where an important speech happened. That was good. But looking at the word Appomattox, it might as well have been in ancient Sanskrit. I mean, really, just not a clue. So family ties are also, I think, increasingly frayed as the wartime generation grows ever more distant. It's estimated that 100 million Americans have a Civil War soldier somewhere on their family tree, which is a lot. It's 1 in 3 Americans. But when you think about the other way, it's actually they're outnumbered 2 to 1. And even for those 100 million, when the distance is no longer, say, your grandmother's grandfather, but something more distant, it's increasingly hard to feel any kind of real emotional resonance with that. And then, of course, there are the flags and the monuments. And at the first session of that course, I'd shown the students footage from just a few months earlier of people their age at the University of North Carolina yelling and cheering as they pulled down a Confederate statue, the famous Silent Sam. And it was the kind of scene that those of us who were alive in the 20th and early 21st century saw in Moscow in the summer of 1991, saw in Baghdad in 2003. It was the kind of scene that we typically associate with what's called regime change. And in fact, it's a scene that's far from unprecedented in our own country. In 1776, many Americans were shocked and horrified to watch their own countrymen pull down and destroy what was then considered the most beautiful and important work of public art on the entire continent, which was a gilded statue of King George III on horseback that stood right at the center of Manhattan, and of which today only a few fragments of tail survived. The rest was melted down to make bullets for the Continental Army. So perhaps scenes like the one at UNC are their own kind of regime change as well. Meanwhile, insurgent and resurgent extremists on the far right proudly brandish the battle flag and defend monuments, see how good a job they're doing, not out of a genuine concern for history, but to serve their own twisted ideologies. And in the middle of this, all nuance disappears. So what does this mean for Franklin? Amidst such an unsettling cultural environment, is there even any point to keep doing what you're doing for another 15 years, let alone 150 years? Now, it may not surprise you to hear that my answer is yes, and now more than ever. Those scenes of mayhem at the monuments, as unsettling as they are, show that the Civil War still matters. It's still the ground on which we Americans fight some of our most important fights. It's still the language in which we speak some of our deepest held beliefs and, yes, argue some of our most important arguments. Now, I come from one of those 200 million American families without a relative who fought in the Civil War. In fact, my earliest American ancestor arrived in the last month of the war's last year, December 1865, the very month, incidentally, in which the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was officially ratified to end slavery. And yet, as soon as my 21-year-old ancestor arrived, no doubt excited and fearful in this land of opportunity, the Civil War was his too. He'd grown up in a small town in Eastern Europe where there was no such thing as black and white. You were Jew or Christian, you were peasant or nobleman, and yet the moment that his ragged Lithuanian foot touched the ground of Lower Manhattan, first of all, he became white. He became white. And when he went and rode on the streetcar for the first time, which in those days in New York, those were segregated, he was becoming the beneficiary of 250 years of slavery and its legacy. The moment he went to apply for his first job, laying the foundation for the later prosperity and success of his family, he was benefiting from that legacy, whether he knew it was there or not. And if he'd wanted to start to understand this strange and foreign country that he had just found himself in the midst of, he had to start asking questions about that war that had just ended. And in a sense, I feel like that is true, even for Americans. Well, certainly it's true for me. When I ask questions about America, I have to ask questions about the Civil War. But even for people who have arrived and are arriving much more recently. In fact, one of the most thoughtful and powerful essays that I've ever read from a student was a few years ago. It was written by a young woman who was a Japanese exchange student in one of my classes, her first semester in America, who'd chosen as her subject the simple granite slab engraved with names of both Union and Confederate soldiers that stands in the middle of our main street in the small town where my college is in Maryland. And she wrote, she sat there, she pondered, and she wrote a beautiful and eloquent essay about America. And even now, the war, we need to keep reminding ourselves and reminding others, the war is not that far away. One of the most exciting, it's very exciting to be here tonight and a real honor to be here tonight, but one of the most exciting moments I've ever had as a speaker was in April 2015, the anniversary of the end of the war. I was invited to President Lincoln's cottage in Washington, D.C. Have any of you been to President Lincoln's cottage? It's an absolutely incredible historic site that really just opened to the public relatively few years ago. It's where Lincoln is thought to have worked on the Emancipation Proclamation, a significant portion of it. So I was invited to speak actually in the room where he worked on the Emancipation Proclamation. And afterwards, well, I saw that there was a gentleman in the crowd who was sort of watching very intently from the front row. Older African-American gentleman, not terribly old, but older. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed and appreciated your talk. And I especially appreciated it because my father was a slave. And I said, wait, your father was a slave? I'm thinking, well, maybe he means his grandfather, maybe his great-grandfather, or maybe he's from some other country where they had slavery more recently. And I said, your father? And he said, my father was born in Virginia in 1862, and he had me when he was 70 years old in 1932. Yeah, and it just sent chills up my spine again to just say that. And he was the son of a slave. And when I spoke to him, I knew it is not that far away. So, what you are doing here at Franklin has become, in a sense, countercultural. In a world increasingly dominated by the immediate and the instantaneous 40-character Twitter tweets, a 24/7 news cycle, you stand here for taking the long view. So that's countercultural. But I would argue that in a world where everyone else is focused intently on what's right in front of their face, literally, I don't know about here, but in Washington, you walk down the street and everybody is staring at their iPhone. It's like some bad dystopian science fiction. When everybody's focused on what's in front of their face, there's a competitive advantage to be the one who's looking a mile in front or a mile behind. There's a competitive advantage, and more than that, there's something essential to our society to think about where we collectively and where each of us individually, the lives that we lead, the decisions that we make, fit on that great arc of history that connects the centuries to each other. And that is something that I hope that no matter where we are on the political debates of 2019, that's something that we agree on, that's something that we need more of. So, one of the reasons that I find Franklin so powerful, and more so in many ways than places like Gettysburg and Antietam, to be honest, is because of how the past and the present really intertwine here. 15 years after that National Geographic piece, it can finally be said, can finally admit, I kind of love the sprawl. Don't take this as a reason to stop doing what you're doing. But, I love how it reminds us that the Civil War isn't some remote, misty, romantic landscape. The ghosts walk right here among us, threading their way between the Target and the tire store. Here in Franklin, the Civil War isn't some place you visit as tourists, but rather the place where you shop and you work and you live, and that's how it should be. That's what's true. And here in Franklin, you can show us how it's done. You can show us how to make the ghosts visible and how to tell the stories. In fact, you already are showing us how it's done, and there's no better example of that than tomorrow's monument unveiling. That tribute to the enslaved people buried at Carnton is a truly remarkable thing. In a country that has 6,000 monuments to those who suffered and survived the 4 years of the Civil War, and 1,500 of those 6,000 are Confederate monuments. But still, no more than a relative handful of monuments to the people who survived and suffered the 250 years of slavery. You can visit, as I did a couple of years ago, the mansion of James Madison, the principal author, of course, of the U.S. Constitution, which had recently, when I was there, undergone a $25 million restoration, and find that the enslaved cemetery there is covered in poison ivy and weeds. Not here at Franklin. And that is a tremendous, tremendous achievement. And guess what? When you know how to tell those old stories in new ways, people actually come and listen to them. The movie Harriet, with its stunning and accurate depiction of Harriet Tubman leading Union forces on a raid in 1863, has grossed $16 million since last weekend. Now that is, admittedly, half of what the new Terminator movie has grossed since last weekend, but I am a glass half full kind of guy, and the new Terminator movie is a pretty big glass to fill, so I think $16 million is pretty great. Now, before I finish, I want to tell you about one last person I met on my first visit to Franklin in 2004. So one afternoon, I went out metal detecting with a 16-year-old student, high school student, this kind of adorably geeky kid named Evan Kutzler, who took me hunting for bullets in what was about to become the parking lot of Target. Well, we spent a few hours together. I went my way and he went his. And then a few years ago, out of the blue, Evan emailed me to tell me he had decided to become a professional historian, and that the afternoon he'd spent with a National Geographic writer all those years ago had been kind of an important moment for him. Well, that thoughtful and curious 16-year-old in 2004 is now a history professor, teacher, scholar, and preservationist in Southwest Georgia. He's now in his early 30s. In other words, he is almost as old as I was in 2004, which is kind of crazy. And next month, he is publishing his third book. Yeah, right? So what you are doing here, you are doing for people like Evan and the people who will follow him and who I have no doubt right now, as we speak, as in 2004, they are out there around here, and they're out there more distantly, and they are going to find themselves and their calling in this place. So last week, as I thought about this talk and about Franklin's charge, a famous quote came to mind: "Make no little plans, they have not the power to stir men's blood." Now, you're probably more up to speed on this than I am, but I couldn't remember who'd said it and when. I thought it might have been Thoreau, it might have been Emerson, so I looked it up. And lo and behold, I found that the author was someone else. It was the great early 20th century architect and urban planner Daniel Burnham, writing in the early 20th century, and guess what he was talking about? He was actually talking about parks. He was speaking about the sprawling growth of his booming hometown of Chicago, and he was exhorting civic leaders to set aside open spaces for contemplation and reflection and civic life. And I think it's worth closing my remarks with some of the words that he closed his with. "Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood and probably will themselves not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in hope and work, remembering that no noble plan, once recorded, will ever die, but long after we are gone, it will be a living thing." Congratulations, Franklin's Charge, for the big plans that you have made, are making, I hope will make for a long time to come. Please just don't tear down too many more fast food places. Thank you so much.
Before I introduce our state historian, let me mention that there are so many people here tonight that should be mentioned. Among them are Jay, let me see if I can get it, Sobrino, who, yeah, him too, who is representing Senator Marsha Blackburn. And also, if you are an official in this community, a city or alderman or a county person or something like this, would you raise your hands? And finally, I have to say that we are extremely honored to have a usually when people retire, you don't really, you forget them. But we have in Senator McDaniel a greatest friend outside of Franklin we've ever had. And so thank you very much. Okay, they're all second tier to who I'm about to introduce. I have known Carol Van West for many years. He came and he blasted me out the first time he met me, and I probably deserved it, but I hope he won't go into that tonight. But he is not only a friend of Franklin and of Tennessee as the Tennessee state historian, but Van West has been a friend of America. I have seen this over and over again. When the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts said they wanted to have a scholar head up their summer institute and asked me who I would suggest, I had only one person on that list, and it was Carol Van West. He has done so much for so many, and we are the living proof of that here. There is no greater friend that we have ever had than Van West, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And for those of you who don't know, the cane is the week number 15 of having a broken ankle that I suffered at a Civil War battlefield in West Tennessee. So, maybe it was all appropriate. I do love the opportunity to serve the state and to serve the country and do what I can and bring all of my students to bear to the problems and the challenges and the opportunities that we have now in historic preservation. And that's really sort of what I wanted to just make a few brief comments with you guys tonight. Because often, and some of you have heard me on this before here in Franklin, I realize that, people don't quite realize just what you have accomplished. One time, one of the great preservation leaders of the country pulled me aside and said, what happened in Franklin, that's just a miracle. And I got real indignant and said, you really need to engage with that community. It's not a miracle. It took time, it took commitment, it took money, and it took more of all of that, triple times over. These guys have worked because they had a vision. And that vision has driven you guys the whole time. It wasn't so much saving just a Civil War battlefield. It was really saving those multiple stories that are embedded in all of our Civil War places. I always love when this type of event begins with a Pledge of Allegiance, because I come to those last lines and I can always almost stumble. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What we have all pledged for years. When we were in school, we did it every morning. School kids today still say that every morning. And just think, if it's not for the Civil War, they're not saying that. Our credo as a nation comes out of the Civil War. That when we realized we needed to be a nation not divided, but one. And the only way to achieve that was to have liberty and justice for all. So yes, Robert's right. I won't go into the long story. At first, I was skeptical because I'd always heard a lot about, Civil War battlefields, and then people just, but then we want to have that ground so we can tell someone what to think. And instead, I was like, that's not the way I operate. I want the historic landscape to be open, to be interpreted fully, for that whole story to be told. Because different people from different walks of life interact with it in different ways. Adam, in his brilliant comments, really underscored that. This country is made up of many different people from many different walks of life. Anytime you decide you're going to preach and force someone to know something the way you want them to know, you're doomed to failure. But here in Franklin, what you guys have done is really taken two vast open pieces of land, preserved them. Some people come to read the history and the historical markers. Some come just to walk and relax and enjoy that open space. And I always think, more power to them. That landscape doesn't have to mean the same thing to everyone, but together as a nation, we all know that landscape and that place and that story matters. So Adam has given us a sort of chilling warning of what's to come. If we lose our past, do we lose our nation? Sometimes I think that's a real possibility because you hear it all the time. Oh, I want to tell someone what to think. I'm going to show them what to think. And instead, they should be saying, as I often do, it's one of my old techniques, well, where are your primary sources? Because history is the ultimate. It is what it is. And those sources, that evidence, can guide us. And the evidence on the Civil War is overwhelming. It was a total war. We were lucky we didn't lose the nation. But instead, we did found a new republic. And it's been tough. The full promise of the Civil War I always think it took another 100 years to achieve it. The peace treaty took that long to really work out, and we're still working on it every day. But that's okay. That can keep us frosty. Sorry, I'll use a Terminator quote there. That can keep us sort of on edge. We can sort of appreciate maybe what those before us fought for and gave us, because it is a gift. And it's a gift that we have to understand. We have to debate, but we have to understand. And we have to be committed to moving forth as a nation, or as you guys have provided the model, as a community. Because that was another thing that convinced me back in the day, was where this wasn't just one group of people making the decisions. It was all of these different groups that I knew in different ways. The African American Heritage Society, I'd just been working with them and Tom Murdoch in particular and Pearl Bransford, along with one of my brilliant graduate students, Laura Stewart, now Laura Holder. We were working to preserve and list in the National Register of Historic Places Natchez Street. Exactly at the same time Robert's having his luncheon to launch Franklin's Charge. So, I wondered, can these things combine together? Because that neighborhood is also linked to the greater story of the Civil War. You couldn't miss it. You couldn't deny it. And then we turned our attention to the Toussaint Louverture Cemetery. And that cemetery is so important and has such a big story. There, U.S. Army veterans are buried, U.S. colored troops, the segregated units from the Civil War, they're buried there. A huge story. And then we started to realize there was so much here to do, and enough for a lot of people to do it. And thank God you guys did the work, because we could come in and provide expertise and commitment and energy, because again, I have that unending source of brilliant graduate students who want to come and learn. So you put them to work, and they get to work, and they do the work. And that's been just great to see that shape Franklin as well, because Adam had his story of the young historian. I could multiply that many times over, of students who have come in and worked on these projects in your community, and they're going out and making a difference across the country because they learned here they could make a difference. That what community drive and commitment can do is wonderful. So I want to commend you. I want to celebrate what you have done, because what you have done here in Franklin, I fully agree with Adam. There's no parallel to it in the rest of the nation. But it doesn't mean that the job is done. And that ceremony tomorrow is just another indication that the work continues, and it should continue, because we still have more to do. So I thank all of you here tonight for that. And since I have a captive audience, and many of you being folks that I have worked with for over 30 years, I also want to thank 3 additional people. First is my wife, Mary Hofschwelly, because many of you have never met Mary. But, she's the one who allows me to come over here and do all of this work for 30-something years. Now, she sometimes would roll her eyes and say, "Franklin, again?" But she never said Franklin no, because she knew what was going on here was important to me, and she could see how it was important to the state and anyone who really was interested in good historic preservation. So I don't get a chance much to thank Mary in public, but this is exactly the right place to thank her, because I guess I've spent more time in Franklin than I have any other place in Tennessee except my own hometown of Murfreesboro. And then I want to thank one of my new PhD students, Colby Lane Hogan. Colby worked with me and did all of the real leg work, because I think some of you know in the summer I couldn't do much leg work, to produce the booklet that you have here. One thing that we thought was important at the Heritage Area was to get this story into print, because we can have a great session like this tonight. We can have Adam's comments running on local cable, maybe being shown in classrooms, distributing that. But you know, historians always like things in print. So we tried to capture that story so everyone would know this isn't just a lot of rhetoric and words, it's real accomplishments, things that have been done over a 15-year period that is really hard to believe until you read the words and look at the photos. And we did have fun going through my computer and finding so many of these photos over the years of the different groups, the different people, the different events. You know, we could have made a 200-page photo book of all of this. It's been so remarkable over the years. So thank you, Colby, for all of your work that you did on this project. She came into MTSU telling me, you know, I really would like to work some in the Civil War. And one of those days I came up to her and said, so you really want to work on the Civil War? And she was like, yes. And I said, well, I've got a project for you. And I think she's done a great job on this booklet. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank Laura Holder. I think many of you know how close she is to me. She's my right hand. Okay, Laura, I said I wouldn't do this. I'm sorry. But I don't know if all of this work in Franklin that I get to do would happen without her. She came into my classes in 2003. I didn't know her from anyone. She showed that she was really interested. She wanted to make a difference. And she soon became my sort of first program administrator at the Heritage Area. And as they say, that's all history since then. She's done a brilliant job of working with so many of you. She's now on the board of the Battle of Franklin Trust, which just seems like a logical progression. And she's worked not only on this booklet, but everything that is good about what the Heritage Area does. We can really give credit to Laura Holder. She doesn't like the limelight. She doesn't like the spotlight. But tonight, she has earned that spotlight. And let's give her a big round of applause. Just two more. I want to also thank Senator Marsha Blackburn. Some of you know Marsha far better than me, but I can tell you back when I got started with the Heritage Area in 2002, she was a sort of newly elected representative. I had known her from her time in the General Assembly, and she just told me, do what you can, keep me informed. I'm interested. And she's been good to her word ever since. So Jay, please take that word back to her that we really do appreciate her leadership here on all of these issues. And of course, right now, she's leading the charge for another sort of related topic, isn't it? Women's suffrage. What was promised to women at the time of Reconstruction, they were then told, oh, let's take care of African American male suffrage first, and your time will come, just wait, be patient. Well, they had to wait 50 more years. So again, I know she is leading a bipartisan effort in Congress right now to commemorate women's suffrage, and I just think that's part of our story as well. You know, redefinition of citizenship after the Civil War is one of the great outcomes of all of the bloodshed of that time. Now, the last person I want to acknowledge, again, is Robert Hicks. We've had our differences. We probably still will over time. But I appreciate Robert's commitment, his humor, his intelligence, and his ability to strike back at me. I love the type of guy who gives me a good fight. And Robert's been a good battler all of these years, as we all know. And when I think of my involvement with Franklin, I think of people, Robert, I think of Mary Pierce, I think of Julian Bibb, I think of Stacy Watson. Those were the guys who always knew they could reach out. And when they told me, you need to come over, you need to come have a cup of coffee, we'll go to Mary D's. That was always Rick's thing. He always knew I was a sucker to go to Mary D's. And we would sit down and sort of plan. Well, Robert was the ringleader of all of that. So, along with giving him a round of applause, Robert, I'd like for you to step up here to the podium.
This isn't in the program.
No, I know. But there's a final step that we would like to take tonight, and I think Robert should be the person doing it. I appreciate the honor of being asked as state historian. I understand that. But hey, we're with friends here. We're in Franklin. I want Robert to take this next step.
Okay. So, we have this, I have come from a long line of delusional people. And anyone who knows me, poor Kelly has been like working on things all week. And I mean, and all the people in Franklin's Charge, and there's a huge amount of, in fact, could everyone that's on the board or has been on the board of Franklin's Charge, would you please raise your hand? But none of this could have ever happened without a couple who are here tonight. None of this. It would have been just simply another delusion of Robert Hicks's. And there have been others that have just kind of failed, and we don't talk about. But there is a couple here who have done and given from the very beginning to make this possible. And so there is now an award which has maybe, Angela, how old is this award? There is a very prestigious premier award that we would like to present to Kay and Roderick Heller. Please come up here. Okay, so I want to read this. I'll sit down. I want to read this to you. Now, by the way, I really didn't have any, I want to go on record. Well, Angela, you defend me that this was not. Okay. This award is called the Bibb Hicks Franklin's Charge Founders Award, and it's presented to K. and J. Roderick Heller III. And 2019, Franklin, Tennessee. We are more than thankful in any way we could ever say for what you all did, for how you let Franklin's Charge and the future of Franklin so move forward by your initial gift. Anyway, thank you very much.
Robert. Well, thank you very much. It's obviously a wonderful thing for us, and particularly delight for me to have Kay, who's been part of this from the very inception. And I want to make one comment. We moved here 7 years ago, and I was saying earlier tonight to someone that Franklin to me is unique, not only because of the leadership that so many have displayed, what Robert has done. Van's been a marvelous leader. But Franklin is a place where you can look not to one, not too many. Franklin has mothers and fathers that have made this community what it is. We all love Franklin in a way that I don't think many outsiders appreciate. And it's because of the way all the citizens have come together, the leadership has come together. So Kay and I are delighted to play a role, but we see ourselves as only a part of this great group of preservation leaders in Franklin. Thank you very much.
We could not have done it without these people stepping up. And we will never forget that. We never have forgotten that. And that will be our call throughout all time. Now, a couple of things. There's many more people that should be thanked tonight, and I can't do it. But I think you know who you are. And I appreciate you, and we appreciate you. This is not an end. When Van West told us that he thought we should put this together, he was saying this as a new chapter. We are continuing in the work that we began 15 years ago. There will be new pieces of property that we'll be talking to you about. You can run away from me and Mary Pierce, as you have at times in the past, but we'll catch you. Because this is a really important work, because something really important happened here. We all stopped, as I often say, being simply Tennesseans and Ohioans, Marylanders and Texans are still separate, but all the rest of us became Americans. A few years ago, Mary had this group that was going to kind of relabel Franklin. And so they stupidly invited me. And so they're in there and they said, what would you say? Originally, Franklin was the prettiest small town in Tennessee. It was such a qualifier, handsomest small town in Tennessee. Then it became historic Franklin. And now they wanted a new call. And so I said to these marketing people, they said, what would you say? And I said, well, when I was a child traveling through the South in a code language to talk against integration, it would say, welcome to Charleston, where the Old South lives. Welcome to Madison, Georgia, where the Old South lives. Welcome to Savannah, where the Old South lives. As if to say, we won't move forward. I said, you know what I think we should say? Welcome to Franklin, where the Old South died. And these Yankees looked at me and said, no. And I said, well, how about this? Carrie McGavick called it Bloody Franklin. Then I said, okay, how about this? Welcome to Franklin, the morgue of the Confederacy. And at this point, they turned and said, Mr. Hicks, we really appreciate all your thoughts. And we'll get back to you. But if you want to know where we started becoming the nation we are working toward, then come to Franklin, Tennessee. And that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here. And tomorrow, you get to be part of this. I am really hoping that every one of you and everyone you know will come out to the McGavick Family Cemetery when we unveil a 10,000-pound monument. That's bigger than me. To those who have for so long been forgotten, either enslaved or descendants of enslaved or former slaves. These men and women are buried there. Our whole hope in that is with the hundreds of enslaved cemeteries in this county that have now been plowed under, that this will somehow represent part of the whole story that we're trying to tell. That's really all it is. It's at 1:30 tomorrow. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be an extraordinary day. And I think it will bundle up. It'll be a little chilly. But it will be, again, part of what we're doing here, what you're doing here, to tell the whole story of how we became and are becoming Americans. So I thank you for coming tonight. No, we'll be talking to you about money. Don't be tricked. And we are very, very grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you.